Howdy do, everybody. Good to see you again. Welcome back to the Square the Circle Music channel. We're talking about circles and squares again tonight, like we always do. Wanted to go over some really fun stuff tonight. Want to take you way back to the magical era that we like to call the 90s. 90s, it was a great time and place to be. I was just a kid. I was like a teenager, learning about rock and roll and what it means. And so I wanted to go over a list of 10 things tonight in my collection. Little gems, hidden gems of the 90s. This is fun because, like I said, I'm from that era, and there's just a wealth of little bits and pieces that a lot of people not too familiar with. And I wasn't either, to be quite honest. I will shoot you guys straight because I like you guys. A few of these, more than a couple, I didn't even know about in the 90s because I was just, like I said, I was just a kid. I was kind of being force-fed whatever, my buddies were listening to or whatever the radio was telling me to listen to, which isn't always a bad thing. I mean, give me a break. When you were growing up in the 60s and 70s and 80s, whatever, you were grateful and you were thankful that you got spoon-fed all of that, lovely kitschy pop that you grew up on and that we all love, and yeah, whatever. So it was the same. It was just a little bit different of an era. Things were pretty eclectic and pretty cool. You could get away with liking a lot of different shit all at the same time, and no one really thought you were a weirdo about it. So I'll stop jibber jabbering at you and just bring out the goods. How does that sound? Like I said, these are going to be some kind of lesser known, some gems of the 90s that a lot of people aren't really very aware of. So I'll get right into it. This is one that a lot of people, if you're a collector and an appreciator and someone who is like actively seeking out cool and interesting music that you may not have known about, this is one of those that like never was on, the front shelf or the, poster window in your record store or nothing like that. Kind of an obscure one that is just now really getting some really serious notoriety because people are realizing how insanely fucking cool and ahead of its time it really was. A band called Slint. Album is called Spiderland. This was in 1990, I believe. I think the majority of this was probably written and recorded in 1989 and then released in 1990 to little or no fanfare or acclaim whatsoever. The Touch and Go label, which is actually a pretty prominent label, but in the punk rock world and hardcore scene. And so immediately upon some research, if anyone does any research about these guys, that's what they're associated with. I'm not going to go as far as to say that's not what I think it is, but it's just different. It's way more unique and avant than anything that I've ever come across in that ilk. If coming from, you can tell they were inspired a lot by, the hardcore stuff that was taking place that, was kind of like from like the DC scene and all that. But these guys, I believe, were from Kentucky. I want to say either Kentucky or Tennessee, but just a bunch of fucking kids. Look at these guys. They don't look a day older than 17 or maybe 18, I think, when they created this music. Mostly created by a guitar singer guy, and he had a friend that he grew up with since they were young children, the kid who played drums. I don't recall their names, please forgive me. But you know what happens when you get two dudes or two girls or whoever, together at a young age, and they just kind of have like a, that energy and that kind of relationship where it's just kind of like they can do whatever together and they're not going to judge each other and they're not going to, they'll hold each other accountable to a certain degree, but it's like kind of like it's just kind of like experimental playground. Like, let's just have a band and let's just play music, and I'm not going to give you shit for what you're doing, and vice versa. And you get some of the most interesting, creative, you know, boundless type of music out of that. This stuff just, you know, like I said, gained a lot of inspiration. These guys grew up in the punk scene, you know, the mid 80s. And so you hear a lot of influence from, you know, Fugazi, and a lot of influence you can tell, like, you know, from Black Flag. Primarily this kid, he is not a lot of actual vocalizations as far as like melody going on. There's almost no melody whatsoever on this album, vocally speaking. I mean, a lot of it is spoken word, you know, and just kind of hear him kind of like whispering in the background, like talking about just all this kind of interesting, subtle, dark poetry that's going on in his head. You know, he's just, you know, problems with love and problems with, you know, learning how to grow up and learning how to become a man, and some political stuff, and some just really just interesting, kind of bizarre, nonsensical stuff mostly. And you know, it's all just kind of spoken word. The music is incredibly inventive. There's lots of play with rhythms, lots of odd meter stuff you wouldn't expect. I mean, I guess you wouldn't expect, but you didn't hear that. You didn't hear a lot of that in the late 80s to early 90s with punk rock and hard rock and stuff, with guys, you know, playing around and doing all these interesting like 7 patterns and 9 patterns, and just really subtle, really cool, great drumming, great inventive guitar playing. All the players are fantastic, and so for guys this young, you know, it's kind of mind-numbing how fucking ahead of its time it was, and experimental, crazy cool shit. I don't think they were aware of what they were doing. Maybe, I don't know. I think I read at one point they had kind of like a reunion kind of hangout sesh. They only really made this one album. I think they had an EP prior to this in '89, but did I mention that already? Maybe. Anyway, this album, like I said, just an underrated, unknown kind of a gem from early on in the '90s. Band called Slint, album called Spiderland. My musings here didn't do it justice, so see for yourself. Check it out. Really, really, really cool album. My favorite song on the album is the Washer song, first track on the B-side, the song Washer. Kind of the only song on the album, honestly, that has a bit of a melody to it. In my opinion, something that probably inspired a little bit to the band Failure, if anyone's familiar with the band Failure from the 90s, another kind of, you know, not obscure, but just kind of like a little bit lesser known band from the 90s that I love dearly. You can hear a lot of probably what inspired Ken Andrews a little bit in the late 80s, early 90s from these guys. So yeah, check it out. Moving along, number 9 on the list of gems from the 90s, maybe stuff that people aren't really aware exists. This is one of those, pretty hyper obscure. I didn't discover these guys until recently, in the last maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. One of those things where you pump a band into Pandora, and it just, you know, generates all kinds of interesting new things that you never would have discovered before. This was a Pandora find for me. I'm really grateful that I did, because this shit, believe it or not, I used to go jogging a lot. I used to hit the jogging path. I don't look like it, but I used to gain a lot of solace from running at night, and this would come on when I'd be, I mean, everyone knows Eugene is Tracktown, USA. I've never been a runner ever in my entire life. I used to smoke a pack of cigarettes a day, and I was like probably 38 years old and still a smoker, and I was like, I gotta start doing something. I gotta do something, you know. And I just started trying to jog, and I started really getting off on it, and I was like, wow, I really understand why people like this. This is really great, and I really got into it. Anyway, sorry, this video is not about jogging, but it's about, you know, wonderful feelings, and it's about how you achieve those, you know, wonderful feelings, and this band does that for me, and I associate it with the high I get from going on a run at night. This music would come on, the stars would be coming up and the moon would be coming up, and this is a band called Lanterna. Sorry, backwards. A band called Lanterna. This was their eponymous release, 1994. It's a small group. I believe there's only 3 guys in the band, maybe 4 at some given time, but I think there's only 3. Primarily the brainchild of the gentleman who plays guitar. This is instrumental music. Again, there are no vocal. Well, some of their albums have maybe 1 song, sometimes 2 songs that have a little bit of vocalizations, but honestly, not even any real lyrics. Sometimes they'll just be playing and they'll get to a heavy or high part in the song where it's kind of like cacophony is coming, and he'll just kind of start, start doing some vocalizations that have no lyrics, and it's just kind of like the music, he's feeling the music, and his voice just feels like kind of joining in. It's really great. It's ambient soundscape. People call it dream pop, people call it shoegaze. I mean, it has a lot of labels, none of which I really think do it justice. I don't consider them to be a shoegaze band or a dream pop band. They're not really poppy, but it has those, those earmarks or whatever of, mostly because it's guitar centric, it's guitar heavy, and a lot of effects, a lot of that like kind of reverse reverb, delay, dreamy kind of stuff you hear out of all those shoegaze giants of the mid-'80s, late 80s, that type of thing. So, again, forgive me, I don't remember the gentleman's name who's the lead of this band, but he does a fantastic job creating these ethereal, soundscapes with his guitar, and it's actually groove-based. The drummer and the bass player do a fantastic job, very subtle. Drummer, a lot of the time, he's playing with brushes a lot of times, so like a very subtle, very background, very washy, but still has a driving rhythm, it's not jazz. So yeah, a lot can be said. These guys, they have many, many, many albums. Sorry, this is the, I have numerous albums, but I don't have any on LP. So their records are really hard to come by, and there's only a couple releases that they had that were actually released on vinyl. So this is my favorite of theirs. This one and another one the album's called Highways. It was much later, but this one was their first release, mid-'90s. Wanted to bring this out, show it you guys. Any of you folks that watch my channel that appreciate and love instrumental music, and anything that has, a groove to it, kind of dreamy, ambient soundscape, you'll fucking love this group. Lanterna. Check him out. 90s stuff is so cool. It's so versatile and so abstract and avant, and there was just so much going on in the 90s. All of it was so cool. Rock and roll was beginning to really branch out and not be afraid of showing their emotional side. This was the birth of kind of a subgenre a lot of people like to call just emo or emo rock. In my opinion, this was kind of, all could argue what was going on in the early 80s, throughout the mid 80s, The Cure, things like that. Of course, that's kind of like the beginning of like your shoegaze and your dream pop, which gave birth to emo rock, whatever. These guys, man, they were, in my opinion, the first real like emo rock band. Fucking sick, just amazing. When I heard this shit in high school, I believe 1995, this was released. This band called Sunny Day Real Estate. That's the name of the band. For any of you who aren't familiar, these guys, just magnificent. This album's called Diary. Rush out and get it. It's been reissued many, many times now. I think you can get a copy of this probably for under $20, if you can believe it. When I first bought this, it wasn't released on vinyl in the 90s. They weren't releasing anything on vinyl anymore in the early and mid 90s, so it was pretty rare if you could ever get anything that was released like that. And now, of course, copies of everything are going for $200, $300, $400, which is just absolutely asinine, but it is what it is. This one getting so much more popularity in recent years that they were able to snatch it up, from the gentlemen who own their own music, I'm sure, and start reissuing it, which I'm glad they did. It's just a powerhouse of early 90s. The music is really, really like well pieced together and put together, but it still has kind of like that air of punk, just kind of thrashing guitar work, but the instrumentations and the vocals are so dreamy and beautiful and soft. The man's name who sings and writes the music, his name is Jeremy Enoch, and just a beautiful, beautiful voice, so soft and wonderful, and really reserves those moments for, when he's really, heated and emotional, for the screams and the that type of thing. So you get some really flared up rock and shit, some kind of punk influence in here, but mostly we're just talking kind of like, straight up 90s rock, really kind of fast and furious, great guitar playing, great instrumentations all together. The drummer out of the 90s and the early 90s, one of my favorite drummers. He's just really fantastic. So, yeah, anyone that likes 90s rock, get out there and get you some. Sunny Day, Real Estate, the album called Diary, I believe 1995. Pretty cool, underrated gem from the 90s. A lot of people don't really know about it. This is fun. I love this. So, again, we're going to take another dive into something. This one means a lot to me. This was, I talk about this a lot, one of those moments in my personal life where you come across like a game changer, more than just a game changer, something that kind of, twists your state of mind, something that really opens up the doors of perception in your mind and gives you kind of like a new, not a new way, but just kind of like a new vision into like what life is, and what music is capable of, and how it kind of sets you on another path of empathy. I think I may have mentioned this before, like I don't I didn't gravitate toward hip hop immediately in the late 80s and early 90s like everyone did. When it first came out, it seemed kind of silly and jovial, like people were listening to like Young MC and Eazy-E and all that shit that was just really crass and just really, I was kind of like, what's the meaning of all this? And then of course hip hop does come from a very artistic place. I understand that, and it has its own culture entirely. I didn't jump on that train. I didn't latch onto it right away. It was the same way with like punk rock. I understood where it was coming from, but I wasn't a part of that world, and so it didn't grab hold of me like it did a lot of people. I came from a family that was I want to say well balanced. That's really shitty and stupid to say. Every family has their problems, but my folks really cared about us a lot, and we came from I came from a world that was like I was cared for and loved and taken care of, and I didn't have to fight or strive or struggle for anything, and so I wasn't kind of like a child of privilege, I guess, any more so than my father had a decent paying job and I have this skin color. So that privilege is that privilege. But I didn't understand this world of like the downtrodden and the, subterfuged and just like, you know what I mean? Punk had its reason for existing, and I didn't understand it. Didn't mean I didn't like it. There was some of it that I really understood and gravitated toward immediately. This was one of those bands. Not because I related to their message, but just because I can get behind their message. And their musicality, musically speaking, they were probably one of the first punk hardcore bands that I was like, oh fuck yeah, these guys are legitimate. Of course, I'm talking about Fugazi. Everyone knows the legendary status of Fugazi. I don't need to go on about that, but this is one of those albums that just like a lot of people didn't they don't realize that like Fugazi had a really fantastic musical career all the way into the late 90s and even the early 2000s. This album is my favorite of theirs. It's called End Hits, 1998. This came out, I was graduating high school. I was well familiar with them all through high school. I loved them to death, latched onto them immediately. Probably one of the only real like kind of punk or hardcore bands that I really liked at all. And like I said, because I really appreciated and respected their message of straight edge, hardcore, fuck the system. They were advocates of a lot of great things and advocates of staying out of the corporate whore music industry, all that just that cool punk as fuck shit. And I respected and loved it all. Their musicality, I think Guy Picciotto is an absolute fucking mastermind, genius, songwriter, guitarist. I love his singing style. I think he's an excellent frontman for that band. And everyone says, Ian MacKaye is the front man. I guess, yes, he is in a sense, but people forget that, like, kind of in the early 90s, like, Ian MacKaye just kind of, like, he had his Discord thing going on, and he kind of had to do that. He really only jumped in on a Fugazi song, like, once or twice an album, basically. He puts his stamp on the album and sings a couple tracks and makes it what it is, but in my opinion, Lally and Picciotto, those guys, they made the band. They're Fugazi. And all you need to do is listen to the instrument album, and it's like, there it is. That's Fugazi. They're fucking awesome. Love the shit out of them. They came to my hometown. They played Springfield, Oregon. When I was just a kid, I didn't go to the show because I didn't really know who they were in 1994. I was just a freshman in high school. I was just trying to make friends, and everyone was like, dude, this band Fugazi. And I was like, I don't know who Fugazi is, So I didn't go to the show. That, and of course, when you're 14 years old, my folks weren't going to let me out of the house on a fucking school night to go see some hardcore band downtown Springfield. What are you, crazy? That was my upbringing. But these guys changed my world, my rock and roll world, and this was my introduction into the world of hardcore punk rock. It's just a monumental album. I could go off, I could list all the tracks, whatever. Not going to. The fucking arpeggiator song, dude. Yeah. I mean, like the first track, the break song, it's all Guy Picciotto, all the way through. Ian MacKaye doesn't even come on until like the fifth song. It's called Five Corporations, This one's gone, that's that, another. Yeah, anyway. Fucking love these guys. Get some Fugazi. End Hits, 1998. Yeah, doesn't get any better. It does get different and better all at the same time. This album. Now here's one. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna pretend like I'm fucking cooler than you. I had never heard of this group ever until just about like, I don't know, 5, maybe 6 years ago. And it wasn't even this album that I heard first. But I like this one so much more. It's so great. This is their first album, the band, called Ride. Duh. We all know of Ride. And this album called Nowhere. First album I heard of these guys was the one, I don't know if it was the one right after this with like all the rose petals on it or something like that. I think it was their third album. It has that crazy abstract painting of a person's face with like cucumbers on their eyes and big weird lips. I heard that album like years and years ago, and I was like, what are these? They did that album like 94. Never even fucking heard. And I was like, they're so good. And then I research them, and this pops up immediately. Love the art, subtle beauty. And I was like, 1990. Where was I? Oh yeah, I was only like 10. I was like 10 or 11 years old. I was still listening to Michael Jackson and Weird Al Yankovic and rock and roll. Like, I knew of rock and roll, but I wasn't really reaching out and experiencing anything. I was still just playing Super Nintendo. But this album, is absolute mastery. I understand, I'm well aware, it's on like all of the top huge lists. Everyone knows about it. It's just beautiful. But having just discovered it a few years ago and realizing it came from the very beginning of the 90s era, it has more of kind of the flair of the mid to late 80s, the dream pop, shoegazy kind of sound, which they were, credited as being kind of, a huge part of inventing that and being a part of it. With all that kind of dream pop and noise pop and Brit shit that was going on, man, I love I adore it. It's so fantastic. I don't know a lot about it, but I know what I like, and I like what I know. This is fucking fantastic. At first take, because I'd heard that album prior to this, and I really wanted to like, ooh, let's check this out. It's really cool. And I listened to the A side, and I'm like, okay, Britpop. It's just Britpop. It's like not incredibly impressive, but I still really liked it. It's like it's an earworm, and it's just like it takes you, and you're like, yeah, this kind of reminds me of being a kid, and everything was like simpler. It's really kind of cool. Oh man, the B side in this album is like kicks you square in the fucking nuts. It is just insane. Dreams Burn Down. That song. Dreams Burn Down. That's how they start the B-side. And the rest of the B-side is just like this like intense fucking maelstrom of guitar effects and insanely awesome driving noise pop. But not just like, we're not talking My Bloody Valentine, super avant crazy noise. Like there's like so much, there's so much in here that it's so beautiful. It's so amazing. Anyone that has like recently discovered or has a big place in their heart for that type of like ethereal, dreamy, dream pop, British sound shit that was happening like in the mid 80s throughout the early 90s. If you're a fan of The Cure, if you're a fan of anything Robin Guthrie has ever done, Cocteau Twins or his solo career, the band, who is that band, dude? What are they called? Not Christ Driver. Or it's like Jesus and Mary Chain, Swerve Driver. That's who I'm thinking of. If you like Swerve Driver, if you like the band Low, yeah, dude, you'll love this shit. They are so good. Probably one of the best B-side, rock and roll B-sides to come out of the 90s ever. Check this shit out. Really fucking good. The band Ride. The album is called Nowhere. Okay, moving along. This one, we're going to throw a little curveball in here like I like to do. This one is kind of going to surprise a few of you, I'm sure. They're not really noted as being like a 90s band, but I mean, that was the bulk of their career. They're still playing. They are a rock band, sorta. More or less better known for being associated with all things kind of hippy dippy, kind of goofball shit. Everyone's gonna, think I'm fucking high, think I'm weird for bringing this shit up, but I love these guys. I adore the shit out of this band. Talk about one of the most creative, experimental, taking things from, the psychedelic sounds of the 60s and the intense acid jazz weirdo shit of the late 60s and early 70s, stuff like what, Zappa was doing, this and that. Just experimental, super fun, taking Americana, country, blues, psychedelia, everything. All things under the sun. And just throwing every little bit and piece into their career and into their albums. They've a completely, basically a night and day band as far as what they do and what they're known for on a live scale, and then they go into the studio and create something entirely different. And their sound and what they're capable of, their intense, mastery and talent on individualistically, like on their instruments and whatever, the way they play together. Blah, 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 blah. I'm talking about the band Fish, okay? Hardy, hardy, har, yada, yada. I know. These guys are insanely talented. They're phenomenal songwriters. Every single one of them writes the songs, does lyrics, contributes to the art. They're all multi-instrumentalists. They have other people on the side that help them write lyrics and do art. They create insane live festival shows, but I think that their studio albums are little bits and pieces of absolute artistry, and I just think they deserve to be taken far more seriously than they do. Even their fans, even their fucking dipshit fans need to take them, their fans need to take them more seriously than these live show morons, whatever. As a studio band, I think they're fucking amazing. This album, 1993, called Rift. It was recorded in a fucking Scottish castle. I don't know where they got the idea for that. Probably from like Led Zeppelin or some shit like that. But a concept album, tried and true, from beginning to end. It's all about it's a dream. It's a dreamscape, dream theater. From struggles of initially falling asleep all the way through the dream cycle into waking up in the morning. It's like 12 tracks. It's a fucking wild ride. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. A little bit of everything on here. There's the hippie jazz, crazy, psychedelic, experimental, country stylings, folk, Americana, bluegrass, everything you can possibly imagine on this album. I highly recommend everyone give them a shot. Check this album out. Again, it's called Rift by Fish. Even some of the supposed Fish fans or people that know of them or love them, this one kind of gets forgotten. They, later into the 90s, in the mid 90s, they got to be a little bit more pop sensible. We're kind of doing some more kind of really just like rock and roll oriented stuff. They got some radio time, a few things, but I don't know. This is my favorite album of theirs, so everybody should check it out. Give them a chance. Okay. I think this is probably the last little bit of it here. Yeah, getting close. I want to thank you all again for visiting my channel, giving me the support that you do. I appreciate and love every single one of you. It's a lot of fun for me to see the visitors and the thumbs up and, tell your friends, get them to subscribe. I'm going to keep making these videos. I got nothing else to do. It's a lot of fun for me. So, again, thank you for supporting. Gonna go quite a distance from where we just were. This was a release in 1996 that took the world by storm. No, I joke. A lot of people still, I've never even heard of these guys. My introduction to them was this album, and my little 17-year-old brain fucking shot out the back of my head. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Had no idea that this was the face of what rock and roll would soon become. That's kind of how I feel about these guys. They were like kind of the template for what rock and roll was gonna do, and what, the kind of like what it was gearing toward, and it didn't really go the way it was supposed to. It kind of veered off in the 1997 area and kind of really did some awful, horrible, god-awful things. But then there was this small faction of people and bands and, co-collaborators and fans and whatever that kind of understood what was happening. Like, we need to swim upstream with bands like this. These dudes. Oh my God. The band Refused. I believe they're from Sweden, correct? Maybe. Yeah, I think they're from Sweden. They're called Refused. This this album is called Songs to Fan the Flames of Discontent. I'll never forget the first time I heard this shit. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I really couldn't. The singer, I mean, this comes from a place of like discontent, sheer real fucking revolutionaries, like for real revolutionaries. These guys, the insano political crazy shit that they're involved with and that they're talking about on this album as well, and just insane monster musicians. Their guitar player coming from a place of thrash, punk, metal. I've never heard anyone play like this. It just fucking took me aback so hard. And then their drummer just like, oh my God. Some of the most amazing drumming I had heard to date. You know, this was 96 when this album came out. All the production value was just like really pared way down, just like really minimalistic as far as like, you know, no bells and whistles. You know, the drum sound was just really flat and just like sounded like he was just like banging on the most primitive of sounding drum sets, and just, oh dude, I can't even explain it. Singer just like screaming his fucking eyeballs out, like just the way you're hearing it, like I'm sure that dude's eyeballs are bleeding right now. I'm almost positive of it. Just otherworldly for like 1996. I couldn't believe it. You know, my bro Kyle, shout out to Kyle Moninger. We go down into his sunken living room, basement, bedroom. You know, we're still living with our folks. This is in high school, and the internet's still like brand new. And he's one of those, you know, super smart kids that knew how to use the internet right off the bat and was just like finding all kinds of insanely cool shit. And he just had like a video that he ordered from Stockholm of these guys in like 1997. He's like, dude, check this out. You're a drummer. You'll really like this. It's like shit my pants all over his floor. Yeah, really great stuff. Anyone that loves, in my opinion, this is far more in the realm of, I think, kind of more metal stylings, in my opinion. But obviously what they're talking about, the subject matter, the content, and just the overall, just like power of it. Sure, it's punk as fuck, but it gives me more of kind of a metal feel. So anyone that really loves like 90s thrash, metal, screamo fucking punk rock, awesome shit, this is your cup of tea. Faux show. Had another release like in 98 that actually got some really big acclaim. Because they started, I think they were on Epitaph, weren't they? Yeah, I mean, whatever European associate of Epitaph was, they, you know, the album after this was called The Shape of Punk to Come. I believe it was on Epitaph, and it made some money for Epitaph, and it probably made some money for them. They've put out a couple albums recently. You know, they're old farts, still killing it, doing their thing, punk as fuck. So thank goodness for these guys. Whew. Another one of those bands that just like changed my mind, changed my life. Okay, getting down to the last two. These guys, you'll understand what I'm talking about when you think 90s alternative rock. Especially for me, near and dear to my heart, because these guys epitomize that kind of like laid back lo-fi sound that we have here in the Pacific Northwest that we're kind of known for. Not that we like, you know, created it per se, but you know, you take kind of like the subtle stylings of folk music and folk rock and, you know, big trees and green pastures of the Pacific Northwest, and, you know, and these guys, they just do it. They do it so well. Of course, you all know of Built to Spill. Fantastic. Started as a trio. Of course, throughout the years, they invited more members, but we all know of, you know, the mastermind behind this, the man named Doug Marsh, guitarist, songwriter extraordinaire, sings, really creative, amazing songsmith. His lyrics just so um, approachable and understandable, and palatable, and fun and silly at times, and just there's this album's called "There's Nothing Wrong with Love," and everyone will just love this album. It's just easily adored. Um, there's not much more I can really say about this. Like, if you don't know who Built to Spill is, fucking get on the webs and check them out. They have had a huge career. This was their second album. Their first release like in '93. This was their breakthrough. '94, I believe, on the Up label. Pretty sure. Yeah, Up Records, 1994. Lot of music on here. This is a long one. There's at least like I think 15 to 16 tracks, and it's substantial. He's telling great stories about his childhood and about his relationships and about living in the Northwest, and just what a fun, magnificent album. Just magnificent. And like I said, if you have a place in your heart for that kind of like, lo-fi, simplistic. I wouldn't say simplistic, man. The guy's a ripping fucking guitar player. He really is. Like, he plays some ripping guitar. Ripping. So yeah, everybody check this out if you haven't heard of him, or maybe haven't taken it for a spin in a long time. This is an underrated gem from the '90s. Built to Spill. There's Nothing Wrong with Love. Okay. Oh yeah. This is one of my favorites. One of my favorite albums of all time. I'm just gonna pull it out. It was popular. It was really popular. Everyone loves it. It was on the radio. Catchy as fuck. I don't know where these guys come from. I want to say they're an Austin band. They sound like they're an Austin band. Really catchy, really accessible pop, alternative rock. 1995. The band Tripping Daisy. The album's called I Am an Elastic Firecracker. It's fucking goofballs. They sing about some really funny, quirky, insano, psychedelic, fun shit. It's psych rock, but still poppy, pop sensible. I got a girl, she smells so sweet. Yeah, that song. I don't think they got anything else on the radio. Maybe the Piranha song, watch out for piranhas. Every song on this album is just a hit. It's just a fantastic hit. Yeah, super catchy. Everybody check out the song Prick. It's probably about a 7 or 8 minute song. Super windy, psychedelic, highs and lows. Ends with like this insano, just like they go into a halftime, like, super like, yeah. These guys are fucking great. Really underrated. It got attention, so I won't say it's like, one of those undeserved, like, I don't know, it got attention. They were on fucking MTV, so whatever. I think after this, I think they lost a guitar player. Forgive me, I'm not really good with names and history of a lot of bands, but they had a pretty smashing guitar player, but I think he was also fond of dangerous drugs, and so I think that's what took him. I want to say their guitar player, either their guitar player or their singer. That's kind of usually who it affects. But even still, they weren't able to keep going. I think the remaining members may have like formed a new group that got a little bit of success and did a few other things, but after that, I think that was just kind of it. So I wouldn't say like, one trick pony or kind of like, quick fizzle, but that's what happens sometimes. Either way, if you can find a copy of this, I'm sure you can on CD anywhere for under $10. Finding a copy on vinyl is going to be a challenge, and you're going to pay a high price, but it's worth having in any format. Super fun, super catchy, really great album. Anyone that appreciates, psychedelic pop rock from the '90s, get it. One of my favorites from that era. Okay, this is the last one. You guys have been great. Thanks for hanging out with me and reminiscing some of the highlights from my days in the 90s. It was a lot of good fun. I kind of held on to it for a long time. I'm still holding on to it. Who doesn't? Everyone kind of holds on to their glory days. They want to. And there's tons of stuff in my collection that I listen to from that era, which is all, of course, far more, notable and far more popular than any of this stuff. That's why I wanted to bring these up and out, because they were some of the more, kind of crunched down and less talked about bands. And I like to do stuff a little bit different sometimes and kind of show you guys some of the neater pieces and gems that I have in my collection. A lot of these are actually, kind of rare, kind of hard to find. So I'm proud to kind of bring them out and show them to you guys. This being one of those two. This band means a lot to me. Again, I'll get a little bit blubbery and start talking about how bands open you up and how bands change your view on the world. And music should do that. Music shouldn't always be accessible. Music shouldn't always be incredibly user friendly. That's not my opinion on music. I mean, it was for a long time. You just want to put stuff on that just makes you feel good and the stuff that you love. And I'm of the opinion, and I have been for the last 20 years of my adulthood, that music should make you think, and music should not force you into anything, but it should definitely make you play a part in what's happening. There's like an interface, you know what I mean? There's something going on, and it's occurring between this shit that's being presented to you and the mystical magic that your brain and your heart and every little piece of you is interchanging, and something's happening. And that's what music needs to be. It needs to be an overall experience. And if you just put something on so that you can just like drown out the world, you're listening to music for the wrong reasons, in my opinion. So this is one of those groups that made me rethink who I was and what I liked and what I was experiencing in the world at the time. This was like coming into, this was a turn of an era, so to speak, in my life personally. This was like the end of the 90s. This album came out like 98, 99. I had graduated high school already. I was in college, meeting new people, making new friends, doing new things, new experiences, and this was like a good old friend of mine. Shout out to Jared Hill, who opened my eyes and helped me to experience new things and new ideas and concepts of the world and fantastic, crazy shit. Good old friend of mine. He's a little bit older than me, so he's like 3 or 4 years older than me. So by the time I was in high school, he had just gotten out of high school. So when I was an adult, he lived down the street from me, and I started hanging out with him, and we'd hang out and just like chain smoke cigarettes and play Magic the Gathering, and just like, he'd show me all this stuff. He'd be like pulling out his Crass records, and oh man, you really need to be listening to the Melvins. Like, you really need to be listening to the Melvins, and like, it was just like, being his little like Padawan learner, like, you need to learn all this shit. I was like, yes, you're right, I do. And this was one of those bands. For me, he enlightened me to like how great this shit is. Sorry, I'll stop going off about personal stuff, but this band changed my view on heavy music and how tasteful and artistic and amazing it can be, how the depth of emotion and the depth of feel. This band, Neurosis. Whew. Fucking game changer. This came out in 1998, Times of Grace. like I said, fucking game changer. I didn't know that music like this existed, where it could just like rip your face off and then caress you and hold you tight like a child, all at the same time. It's just, you know, um, I was enlightened to this stuff, you know, and it didn't stop here. You know, he introduced me to all kinds of great new music, and then I kind of went forward and started just finding stuff within the same vein and just experiencing all kinds of new stuff. Um, my friend that I was mentioning, we had a band. Like he started a band with another friend of ours, and he asked me if I wanted to play drums. They needed a drummer, and so we started this band, this really kick-ass band. And we were playing for a few months. We had like a practice space that we shared with another awesome band called Short Round, and then they later changed their name. And we shared this practice space downtown Springfield, and we were just making some crazy, cool, fun music. Sorry, long story short, Neurosis came to town. They put this fucking album out in '98, went on a tour all through '99. They came to Eugene fucking Oregon, and we got to open up for them at John Henry's, when John Henry's was still on 11th Avenue in Eugene. And we fucking opened up for Neurosis. I got to meet the guys. I got to play for them. And it was probably one of the greatest experiences of my fucking living life. It was so amazing. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say. Anyone that appreciates and loves, I mean, these guys were basically, you know, the godfathers of sludge, kind of doom metal, but keeping it real, still very artistic, using a lot of experimental things, you know, using sound bites and strings, and I mean, there's fucking bagpipe on this album. There's, you know, horns. You know, I could go over the track listings again. Just a very somber album, obviously dealing, you know, this whole thing is very thematic with, you know, love and loss, lots of loss. I'm not sure what happened in their lives. I believe at this point Steve Von Till was probably doing a majority of the songwriting and the lyrical writing as well. There's the two of them. I can't remember the other gentleman's name who also plays guitar, who's one of the oldest members with, I think, the founding member of Neurosis, even before Steve Von Till was in the band. But anyway, themes of loss and the battle, but I wouldn't say the battles. Like I said, the caress of that is just part of the cyclical nature of things, and you know, you just have that overwhelming sense of just beauty and art and pain and disgust that is the world, and that's like what you get from a group like Neurosis. And I just adore the shit out of this album. It has, like I said, that has, you know, the personal meaning and feelings for me of that era in my life, and this is just one that means the world to me. Everyone should give it a shot. If you like heavier music that is of a more artistic flair, check it out. They're still making music, dude. Even still, you know, Steve Von Till is into doing some really fantastic solo works right now. He's doing all kinds of like ambient and like soundtrack music now and stuff, and like spoken word poetry stuff. It's all kinds of wonderful artistry. So yep, the 90s, what a fun time. This one kind of like epitomizes the crossover, the beginning of a new decade for me. Things were changing, things were getting weird. Rock and roll was changing a lot, but luckily I had learned that, you know, you find the right avenue and you can you can weed through all the bullshit and find the good stuff and kind of, you know, swim up that stream. So again, thank you everybody for joining me on my silly little babbling journey this evening, going over some 90s fun, And I hope everybody saw something or found something interesting that they can latch onto and research, and some new music. And I hope that you guys get a little bit of enjoyment, a little bit of entertainment from this shit that I do. So please feel free to comment if you want to see anything specific or you don't want to see anything specific. If you have any other comments, like, subscribe, do the jam, do the thing, love each other, play your music, play it loud. I love you guys. Peace out.